Welcome to the Ohio Farm Bureau podcast. I'm Ty Higgins. Glyphosate is the most widely used herbicide in the U.S. and has proven to be an effective, cost-effective weed control tool that's enabled farmers to add conservation practices to millions of acres across the country. However, a recent series of challenges in the U.S. Court of Appeals and ongoing public debate has led many to question what a future without glyphosate might look like. A couple of our guests from Aimpoint Research took that question and moved it forward. Mark Purdy is Aimpoint's Chief Operations Officer. Dave Juday is the Executive Advisor for Economics and Trade with Aimpoint. Gentlemen, welcome to the Ohio Farm Bureau podcast. Great to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Ty. Our privilege.
Let's start for those who may not know about glyphosate. What is it? How's it used for Ohio farmers and producers across the country?
Yeah, well, really, this is glyphosate's a herbicide, and as you kind of indicated there, it's the most widely used herbicide. Very effective, I think, at a very high level. When we think of many listeners, this is kind of a base of some of our weed control, and it facilitates a lot of first crop uh, growth and weed management, but then also a lot of conservation practices as well as cover crops.
And Ty, you mentioned in the intro there, it's the most widely used herbicide. That's for a reason, right? It works, and that's why any threat to glyphosate is kind of a potential game changer, which is why we looked at this.
And you mentioned it, how well it works. A lot of farmers don't want to think about a world without glyphosate, but you guys, because of what I mentioned earlier, kind of took that question on and really did some research about what that world might look like. Give us an overview of the study, how you came up with it, some of the logistics behind getting it to where it was.
Yeah, Ty, and I guess to kind of backtrack a little bit about Aimpoint. So our fundamental belief, kind of our why behind what we do and why we're into agriculture and food is, our founders, myself, are farm kids, but I myself spent 25 years in the Army. So our fundamental belief is food security is national security. It's fundamental to that. And so using that kind of military intelligence approach, what's happening now, what could happen in the future, and what to do about it. The ongoing public debate, court cases, and others you teed us up here in the podcast led us to think about, okay, what if there wasn't glyphosate? Because we've got to look at these things with a national security view and what it means to food security at the very fundamental level. So to answer your first question, that's why we started off with it. And at Aimpoint, we use multiple research techniques, analytical methods. Those include open source research, which there's some very good research out there that we leveraged into our report. We did some of our own economic modeling, and then pretty key was the subject matter expert interviews from across the industry. And then we utilize military wargaming techniques to put together the scenario, pressure test a lot of the research and the findings to come up with this scenario. And at the end of the day, we found out that if it went away, you're going to have significant impact on the environment, farmers, innovation, because it is a foundation to a lot of our innovation pipeline right now. And also it's going to impact consumers, through the pipeline at the end of the day.
Just to amplify a little bit on what Mark said, Ty, a lot of the open source research, there's a phenomenal treasure trove of data at USDA, at the Natural Resources Conservation Service, also at EPA. Just as a ballpark average here, you take the big four commodities, corn, soybeans, cotton, and wheat. About 87% of those acres are no-till. That was enabled by glyphosate, and glyphosate is used especially in the Corn Belt more than any other product. And you take that away, and what's the alternative? A lot of this debate gets down the road of, do we need this product or that product? And forgets the fundamental question is, what do we do about weed control? We don't have crop production without weed control. And one of the things we found was that the alternatives to glyphosate on the chemical side would be about 2 to 2.5 times more expensive per acre. And if we went back to tillage, we would about double weed control cost from crop production. But as Mark said, that also opens up several conservation and environmental issues like erosion, water control, and carbon emissions. So it's really been a cornerstone of conservation agriculture.
These are all just mock scenarios, right? This is a what if, but it's got to have some farmers out there thinking about a multitude of things. You mentioned the economic impact, the environmental impact, geopolitical, food prices, innovation, yes. But the main question here is, what would the timeline be? Is that part of this scenario that you laid out? What are we looking at if something were to happen? Is it 5, 10 years, 15 years down the road?
Yeah, that's something that, if you can tell me that, or if I can pick when this would happen, we should probably play the lottery, right? Because it's in a pretty good spot now. But the way we looked at it was really if it went away, kind of period. But we discussed in the Fuller report there that it could happen in a number of ways, either regionally, state by state, maybe some other restrictions on that. And so what we found in the report, this could happen. I mean, the current cases that are challenging the use of it, I mean, it's ongoing right now. So it could happen in part and parcel really at any time. And so you could see a fraction of the impact happen in a portion of the United States. That's feasible at any point in time here in the near future. I think to talk a little bit more about the impacts were immediate in whatever region. We contemplated the entire United States of the looking for alternatives. Supply chain is, we've talked a lot about supply chain with COVID and a lot of the other challenges that we've had around the globe right now. But if you all of a sudden needed a bunch of a weed control substitute to glyphosate, that's going to be out of position. So that'll be an immediate impact. And then the labor and the impact on your yield. So that's going to be immediate, and it's going to take some time to recover from that. In our study, it was about 4 years before there was an equilibrium. And when I say an equilibrium, not a return to normal, but to where the volatility and the disruption of losing it went away.
That a lot of that was informed. Mark mentioned how we relied on subject matter experts, farmers and who use these conservation practices with glyphosate, and it was kind of their in the wargaming scenario, their reaction to what they would do if faced with a loss of glyphosate, what they do in year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, and what they assumed their cost would be.
I want to go back one step in this wargaming process. The environmental impact on agriculture. What does that look like? Do you know in the terms of dollars, or we just know it's going to be heavily impacted? What was the measurement there?
Sure, and I'll let Dave talk in a little more detail. But at the very top line, one, if you take the EPA's map of where glyphosate is used, and if you take the USDA's map of tillage practices, they almost mirror one another 100% in that overlay. And so in the tillage practices alone, you're looking at about 34 million tons of carbon dioxide being added to the atmosphere with the loss of glyphosate. So just for some listeners to put that in perspective, that's about 7 million vehicles on the road annually, or the the impact of energy to about 6 million homes. So it's real, and those things are measurable in a pretty significant way, largely in the center of the United States, from north to south, and Midwest plains, kind of the South. But everything was registered in millions of tons of impacts, even out to the coasts.
And the reason for that is with conservation tillage is based on minimizing the disturbance of the soil, right? Which allows CO2 to be sequestered. You have cover crops, you have no-till, you have conservation tillage. You start dragging a plow across that land again, and the carbon sequestration in the farmland is going to drop. But the other factor is that it takes more horsepower and more fuel to pull a plow across a field than it does to go across and spray it, spray down the weed control. And that is going to result in a huge amount of more diesel emissions on the farm.
What did you find out about food prices as we look to share this with the consumer?
And I'll answer just kind of top line. As we looked, the pull through of impact was it was noticed, probably at a marginal level, but really when you think about corn and soybeans, those are major commodity inputs to proteins. So when you think about poultry, think about pork, beef, dairy. Those are significant impacts to protein costs, and so the overall some impact, and Dave can tell you a little bit more, put that into perspective there. But really, when you look at proteins, that was significant. And if we think about really the push for better diets, nutritional eating, those really good proteins that are recognized there. And when you think about SNAP, WIC, school lunches, the percentage of those funds used for those types of nutrition and proteins there, it's much higher than on the average. So it does have an impact, and an even greater impact on the higher nutritional value proteins. And then when we think about some of our government programs, the impact on kind of the cost and inflation there.
Yeah, I like to kind of describe it as a shift in inflation. So food inflation in the United States, I mean, that's maybe an underappreciated success story, is it's so low year after year after year, except for when there's a big disruption. We've recently seen that kind of disruption, and food inflation was the highest it's been since 1979. And our model, our predictive capabilities are limited only to by the scenario we have. So would it cause inflation above today's prices? Maybe not, because they're at 40-some-year highs. But would this be a shift that, as Mark said, when you're talking about affecting feed grains like corn and soybean meal, would it affect the protein sector? Definitely. So what we can expect to see, I think, is the annual rate of inflation to go back down to more normal, to about 2.5%, with a loss of glyphosate in today's environment. That wouldn't return down to that level. We would have kind of a new paradigm of cost pressures and inflationary pressures on protein production.
Talking about a future without glyphosate with experts from Aimpoint, who laid out scenarios looking at that very end result. Mark Purdy is Chief Operations Officer with Aimpoint. Dave Jude is Executive Advisor for Economics and Trade. As you worked on this and the results came through, what were some of the biggest takeaways for each of you from this report?
And I would say, as we we certainly, back to that food security is national security. So if we're going to make some type of a decision like this on a tool that's used widely, we need to really contemplate the impacts. And I would say I appreciated how significant glyphosate was in conservation practices. Actually getting into this study, getting the complementary research and doing our economic modeling with farmers, doing the war game with our farmer experts and then those from the industry. The understanding of how big of an impact that glyphosate has had on the environment was just that much more than I had appreciated personally. And given that the climate is really kind of that top line issue that we see in Washington and other places, and wanting to manage that, that was probably the biggest takeaway for me, was really quantifying that, and it was greater than I went into this project expecting.
I would say from my perspective, maybe not the biggest takeaway. I'm kind of with Mark. The magnitude of the impact was impressive. But something we touched on in the report, which I think would be of interest to your Ohio Farm Bureau members, was renewable fuels. We talked about the impact this would have on more carbon emissions and less sequestration. What's the logical result of that? The carbon intensity score of corn and soybean farming goes up. You look at ethanol, when the carbon intensity score of corn goes up, there's relative less environmental value from ethanol, right? What's the tipping point? That is those are details we didn't get into, but identified the issue that this could have a significant effect on the progress of ethanol in terms of a carbon reduction fuel, and maybe even the current life cycle analysis for the carbon reduction value of ethanol where it is today. It could move backwards with the loss of glyphosate.
I can't help being with Ohio Farm Bureau to jump right to policy, right? To help solve this issue and not make it a scenario we'll see in real life and simply see it in war games. How does Aimpoint plan on using the findings of this study as we move forward?
Well, and I'm sounding like a broken record here, but we've got to go back to, national security starts at home here. It starts with, our ability to have the affordable resources, whether it's food, whether it's the fuels or the fiber here. And, just back to basics on glyphosate, 87% use across corn, soybean, and cotton. And we talked about the impacts. And so that's got to be appreciated from, how we take care of our citizens and policy, and communicating that loud and clear, and what glyphosate does to make those things cost effective here. And then from a national security standpoint, it's pretty stark. If we take away this competitive advantage, we automatically cede that to the other powerhouse production. When you think about South America, they use it even in greater magnitude, slightly higher. I think somewhere around 80, 89, 90% use of glyphosate. And there's no indication that they're moving away from that. From a production standpoint, China is continuing to produce and increase their production of glyphosate. So they would fill a void in the world where the United States is leading. So that's the big message that we've given to some policymakers, and I want to continue to give. And for all the Farm Bureau members listening out there, happy to share more of that with you, and please, share freely that message.
We're going to put the entire report on a link on this podcast at ohiofarmbureau.org. Future Without Glyphosate, put together by Mark Purdy and Dave Juday. They're both with Aimpoint Research. Really appreciate your time, fellas, and thank you so much for being a part of the podcast today.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Ty.
Ty.
Here in our state, there's an energy at work, a drive to help people live healthier lives with confidence. But it can't be done alone. That's why our healthcare, business, and community leaders have joined together to help people here feel more empowered by their healthcare, leading to improved long-term health and savings. A health plan for small businesses in the agricultural industry was created by the Ohio Farm Bureau Federation. It provides members the tools, resources, and financial protection to feel confident in their healthcare decisions. By sharing responsibilities, we help build healthier employees and communities, driving down costs, connecting members digitally to Anthem's diverse network of local resources, participating in health literacy, easing administrative burdens. Joining the plan means you're part of making healthcare work better, giving people the confidence to make anything possible. To learn more about how the plan can work for your business, visit our website or call your broker or Anthem sales representative.
Find out how Nationwide Agribusiness can help you grow your business. Get to know the people with the experience and knowledge to help you. Whether you are looking to protect your farm or ranch from the ground up, or need someone who understands your changing commercial ag needs. Find out how to better manage the risks of your ag business, or how quickly you can get back to business. Learn how you can protect your next with Nationwide on your side.
Welcome back to the Ohio Farm Bureau podcast. There are over 630 agricultural businesses throughout the state seeing real benefits through the Ohio Farm Bureau Health Benefits Plan. Today, we welcome to the podcast Shelby Giuliano with Andrako Insurance. Her agency is the top broker in the state for this particular plan, and today she's going to share why members are excited about the plan, plus some of the not-so-common benefits that she's helped members take advantage of through joining. Shelby, great to have you on the podcast. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
As I mentioned, you and your agency have had a lot of success signing folks up for the Ohio Farm Bureau Health Benefits Plan. What do members love most about it?
You know what? I think what members love the most is just the choice that you get with the program. There's a wide variety of options available for whatever type of health plan you're looking to offer to your employees or to have for your family if you're a small operation. Plus the fact that it's a PPO network, so that preferred provider organization where you get in and out of network benefits, and just more access to in-network options. Seems to be a thing that most people are looking for, and especially small operations, if they're on an individual plan, it's just something that's not available. So it's a great choice for them.
I mentioned 630 ag businesses throughout the state under this plan. A specific type of business this plan works best for or not?
No, it really works for anyone that's related to that agricultural industry the same. So that can be anyone from farmers that grow food, restaurants that serve it, or even professional services that assist, those agricultural communities. So even lawyers and accountants, it works for everyone.
I've heard you and your cohorts there at Andrako say that these plans are the best on the market. Why do you feel that way?
We really feel that way because of the benefits that are offered on the plans. So one thing that that's offered on the plan designs, there's a number of HSA or health saving account plan options, and they offer true 100% coverage after the deductible. So if you reach that deductible, that's what you're going to spend for medical expenses on the year. Plus they have copay plans that, again, when you compare to individual options out there, the copays on this plan are extremely low for medications and doctor visits. So just really rich benefits on the plans you have to choose from.
A lot of people know when they get into a plan what they're going to be getting, but what are some of the items included with this particular plan that may be a pleasant surprise for members who join?
Yeah, well, one great thing is built into the plan is that every employee covered on the plan does get an Ohio Farm Bureau membership. So the cost for your membership is included with the plan, which comes with all those great discount programs and other features of having the membership. The other nice surprise too, that I don't think people realize is that the plan itself is part of a national network. So we've found from a lot of people, especially if you're living in a border town where you're close to Pennsylvania or Indiana, it's a really nice surprise that you're able to go out of state in order to access care and still be in network. Or if you're in Southern Ohio, you have a heart issue, you want to come up to Cleveland Clinic because they're really good with that. You have the option to travel around for care. So it's a nice surprise when people find out.
Those common benefits, not so common benefits, obviously a plus, but it's all about savings, right? How much can members save when they switch to the Ohio Farm Bureau Health Benefits Plan?
Yeah, so savings, it's different for every group, but we actually just recently wrote someone that had 10 employees. They actually saved 40% on their monthly premium from where they were from their other group plan. So there's a definite potential for savings out there, different for each group, but it's very competitively priced and a great alternative to look at.
Do you have an example of a member who was positively impacted by this plan?
Yeah, I would say that group we just recently wrote, they had a plan that they hadn't looked over for a number of years. Like I said, about 10 employees. But when they saw the savings, they were so excited to move for 40% savings from where they were. And that's just most recent example, but we've had many others like that.
So what steps need to be taken if someone listening right now wants to get started with this plan?
Yeah, so first thing I'd recommend, call our agency. We'll go over kind of the size of your business, what you have for healthcare right now, and then very simple application process. You can either do a paper application or an electronic version. In order to fill it out and get quotes, it takes about 5 to 10 minutes to fill out the application.
You can also find out more online at ohiofarmbureau.org and search Health Benefits Plan. Shelby Giuliano with Andrako Insurance, our guest on the Ohio Farm Bureau podcast. Really appreciate your time and thanks for the information.
Yeah, thank you.